Hey everybody, in this video I want to talk about Stephen King, no surprise there. I'd also like to talk a bit about Joe Hill, Stephen King's son. So like a lot of people who collect Stephen King, I also collect Joe Hill. And just earlier today I posted my video that was called Tips and Tricks for Collectors, or where to get started for beginning collectors. And part of that video was showing the websites of different publishers who have done Stephen King and Joe Hill releases in the past, may do them again, or who we know will be doing Stephen King and or Joe Hill releases into the future. And I wanted to sort of spotlight one of those publishers today, and that is Lividian Publications, or as they were initially known, Letterpress Publications. So in 2019, Brian from Cemetery Dance left Cemetery Dance to form his own imprint. I get the feeling he had a lot of ideas, a lot of things he wanted to put into practice, and forming his own imprint was his way of getting to do that. And he made a splash in a big way in 2019 with his inaugural release for the imprint, Revival. I remember it was really cool because it was available for ordering for a specified period of time, a few weeks, maybe a month, and the people that ordered in that window, that number would set the print run for the book, which I thought was incredibly fair and a really solid way to do things. Another nice feature about Lividian is that they have a buy now pay later feature, which is really handy. You can get your name on the list, and then when the book is actually ready to ship out, you'll get an invoice and be asked to pay for the book. I think it might be more work for Brian ultimately, but I have a feeling he never struggles to move any of these books that people may request and then not pay for or cancel or whatever. But anyway, 2019 inaugural release, Revival. So it was in a numbered edition and a lettered edition, neither of which were signed by Stephen King, but oh man, what a release. It has this nice brown, the cloth that covers this kind of feels like bandage material. You know, that kind of bandagey stuff that's kind of stretchy and it sticks to itself. That's what this reminds me of. But anyway, what a nice book. Full leather all around, imprinted, impressed. It has the raised bands on the spine, and just mind-blowingly beautiful, this book. End papers, full, tons of illustrations. It is signed by Josh Boone, Vincent Chan, Francois Vaillancourt, and Bev Vincent, one of my favorite Stephen King historians. Rear end papers. It has just artwork throughout. It has bonus features, author's note, historical context, Stephen King interview. I mean, original artwork, sketches. It's just a very, very impressive work. And it reminds me very much of, oh man, fold out artwork. Let me see if I can grab that. A 3-panel artwork, just pulled out all the stops. This has all the bells and whistles, reading ribbon. It reminds me of the Suntop release of Misery. So Stephen King, he came through again for another small press, getting off the ground, and gave them the rights to do one of his works and got things going in a big way. So this is the numbered, or the gift. Is it numbered? Well, it's not numbered. It is limited to 1,500 signed copies. That was based on the pre-orders that I mentioned in that window in 2019. Limited to 1,500 signed copies. It's not numbered. There is a lettered edition, which I don't have, but anyway, so there's that. This guy comes out 2019. 2020, they release a portfolio. Oh my goodness. For a size comparison, let me attempt to demonstrate. I ordered the portfolio, and when the box came in the mail, I looked at it and I was like, wait, what? What is that? That I don't even know what that is. I guess that's the portfolio, but by far and away, the nicest portfolio that I've ever seen in this type of a thing from a publisher to support one of their book releases. The case is covered in the same material of the slipcase for the book, that kind of bandagey material. The title's printed on this flap, which magnetically closes. The inside of the portfolio is covered in like a velvety soft cloth. I mean, really pulls out all the bells and whistles on this one. Very cool. So the portfolio, this is the numbered edition of the portfolio, and matches this edition of the book. There was also a lettered edition of the portfolio that matched the look, feel, color scheme of the lettered edition of the book. You may have noticed that my portfolio is empty, but that's because I've taken the prints out and put them in this actual artist portfolio so I can look at them whenever I want and not worry about messing them up. So here's the signature sheet for the portfolio. Signed portfolio is limited to 400 numbered copies and 52 lettered copies. And this is one of the numbered ones. This is copy 58, and it's signed by the artist. And this, I mean, just lovely, heavy stock, really nice prints. So again, just what a way for this press to make an entry into the field. What a splashy way. I was very excited for them. So anyway, that's Revival. And the dust settles, and Letterpress Publications changes its name to Lividian Publications, which is fine because letterpress was maybe a little confusing because it's actually a style of printing books. So Lividian is probably a better name for a publisher, but anyway, the logo stays the same. LP, Lividian Publications, Letterpress Publications, LP. So anyway, that works out. It's okay. So after Revival, Lividian starts branching out, releasing different things. In the past few years, they've done some really handsome, attractive releases from various authors, usually more contemporary horror fiction. They've done Bentley Little, they've done The Chill by Scott Carson. This one is the one that I have, The Last House on Needless Street by Catriona Ward. All of their sort of non-Stephen King, non-Joe Hill books that they've done have this die cut section in the slipcase, which is a really nice effect, really cool. So this is the general template for the non-Stephen King, non-Joe Hill, and they've released a few of these. I think their pace is picking up. They've done several Robert McCammon titles, which is really exciting. But anyway, that's a diversion. This video is to talk about Stephen King and Joe Hill. So I was really excited, like super over the moon excited, when Lividian announced that they were going to be doing a Joe Hill library, not just a particular release by Joe Hill, but one gets the impression that they will be doing all of them. So that's exciting. That got my attention in a big way. What kind of put it over the top for me is that they start releasing images of these books, and they look very familiar. Love leather all around, raised bands on the spine. And I start to think, where have I seen that particular style before? And they match the style of Revival. So even though I don't think I would shelve my Joe Hill and Stephen King books together, it is really nice that Stephen King gets this deluxe treatment and Joe Hill is afforded the same. So far, they've started at the beginning with Joe Hill, and they've done 20th Century Ghosts and Heart-Shaped Box. And eventually, multiple books in this library, and they will all look of a piece. They will all go together beautifully on the shelf, including Stephen King, keeping it in the family. It's very deluxe treatment. So 20th Century Ghosts has this nice cloth covered slipcase. It's pretty flexy. That was the first thing that I noticed, that a lot of people noticed, was that, I mean, it's not bad. It's still nice. It's nice quality, but it's very thin and kind of feels flimsy. By the time Heart-Shaped Box was released, the materials used in the case have gotten a lot heavier and a lot thicker, and this case is much more rigid. But what puts the Joe Hill books over the top, so Revival was not signed by Stephen King, but Joe Hill so far has been, it's very common if a special edition book is coming out of Joe Hill, then he will have signed it, and the Lividian titles are no exception. So inside 20th Century Ghosts, really lovely end papers, signed by Joe Hill and the artist Christopher Golden. The Joe Hill library was handled the same way as Revival, with a pre-order window, and the number of orders would set the print run for the entire series. And these are set at 1,750 copies per title. So, yeah, nice signature in there. So 20th Century Ghosts, of course, is a collection, and I think each piece, each story has at least one illustration. Like a lot of people, it was the first Joe Hill book that I ever experienced, and I read it, I bought it and I read it and I enjoyed it before I knew that he was related to Stephen King. One thing I've always admired about Joe Hill, I mean, the cat's out of the bag now, but he went by Joe Hill, which is his first and middle name, Joseph Hillstrom, Joe Hill, rather than Joe King, to try to make his way on his own and not just based on his famous last name. And like I've said, it's kind of a moot point now, but he did achieve a measure of success on his own. So 20th Century Ghosts, Heart-Shaped Box, really, really nice end papers, 1,750 copies, signed by Matthias Klassen, Josh Mellerman, Francois Vaillancourt, and Joe Hill. Apologies to Matthias Klassen if I totally butchered that name, but it's another, it's got color printing inside the text box. The artwork is beautifully rendered, tipped in to the page block on special stock. there has not been another Lividian portfolio for any of the books, and that's okay. I was hoping for portfolios to go with the Joe Hill books as well, but no big deal there. And like Revival, like 20th Century Ghosts, it includes some special features, a connected story, introduction, afterward, all kinds of special goodies like that. So Joe Hill is an interesting case because while Stephen King churns out, and I say churn with love and affection, but he churns out a book a year, thereabouts, another major release every fall. Seemingly, Joe Hill has his hands in many more pots, and he works on graphic novels and movie and TV. Lock and Key is a Joe Hill project that is an amazing graphic novel series that was turned into a really cool TV series. So his output of fiction, whether they be novels or collections, is much slower than his father, and he really doesn't have that many major fiction, just text releases under his belt. And every single one of those major releases has received at least one special limited edition treatment. So 20th Century Ghosts was covered by PS Publishing back in the day. I think that edition was rather basic, and it was time for an upgrade, and it's fine. Heart-shaped box. Horns will be the next one, and Horns, of course, was famously covered by Suntup. And I've got the Suntup. I was excited to pick it up when it was first announced, also signed by Joe Hill, but Lividian will have not a better or worse edition, just a different interpretation of the same thing. And it is kind of amusing to me because there's this like finite body of work in it. People keep going back to the well to release either entire editions, like 20th Century Ghosts, which is the entire original text, all the stories together in one place. People are dipping in to do releases of individual novellas, individual short stories. Subterranean has late returns. Conversation Tree Press is doing Fawn. These are just stories from larger collections. And the larger collections, in the end, I assume, will also be done by Lividian. So it is kind of amusing in a way, the amount of work that is being lavished on this relatively slight and finite library of major fiction works that have been released by Joe Hill. But anyway, major digression. This video is about Stephen King and Joe Hill, and specifically Lividian Publications. They're so beautiful, all lined up in a row. I'm a big fan of these books. And Horns, so I'll put Lividian's web address in the description. Horns should be, they're doing a lot more stuff. They've got a lot more irons in the fire, and that's really exciting for them. So I don't know if Horns will be this year or next year, but you'll want to sign up for their newsletter, for their mailing list. Brian, the head founder of Lividian, has a Patreon account, which I think for $10 a month, if you sign up at that level, you get chapbooks, which are really interesting. That reminds me, I almost forgot. Speaking of chapbooks, so chapbooks are, this is a concept that I was not familiar with up until just the last few years, but it's sort of a cheaper paperback release that has one story, almost has the sense of like a zine, like a person may create in their garage, but needless to say, the chapbooks that I received from Lividian have been way more deluxe than that. But speaking of dipping into the collections to do individual story releases, Lividian did You Are Released by Joe Hill. Inside the envelope, there's the edition, nice paperback. I really like how they use the arrivals and departures board in the artwork. The special signed edition is limited to 300 numbered copies. This is copy 48, signed by Francois Vaillancourt and Joe Hill. So this is another letterpress Lividian release, and they pulled out. These things are supposed to be cheap and kind of disposable feeling, but there's original artwork in this. It's tipped in. It is, for a chapbook, it is almost comically deluxe. And I was not a subscriber of Brian's Patreon when this was first announced, and first dibs went to people on the Patreon, and I emailed Brian in a frenzy and I said, please, do you have any extras? Do you have any extras? I need this in my life. And because he's such a nice guy, he wrote me back and he said, no problem, I got you, and charged me, I think, $25. And it was an absolute delight to secure that copy and to receive it, and to make sure that I never have to go through that type of stress again. I went ahead and signed up for Brian's Patreon at the $10 a month level. I think you get quarterly chapbooks. You also get tons of emails and inside deals. Brian sometimes gets other publishers' books to sell. Sometimes he'll, if he has a lot of stock and he needs to move it, he'll do other publisher bundles. It is well worth it. He is a really, really nice guy, and he creates some just amazing high quality work. Again, I mentioned earlier, the whole buy now pay later thing is just really, really nice and really well appreciated. And he's doing all this simultaneously with actually creating his own stories. And the latest letterpress Lividian chapbook that I got was actually a Brian original story, which was really cool. But anyway, I would have been remiss not to include this, so I will include the link to Lividian in the description. Sign up for the newsletter. If you have the means and the interest, sign up for Brian's Patreon to support him in the work that he's doing, bringing these beautiful editions to market. He usually gives a bit of a pre-order window to his Patreon subscribers, so I also didn't want to be caught with my pants down, so to speak, when the next Joe Hill book was released. I wouldn't want to, like, hey, I went ahead and announced it to all my subscribers and it's sold out, so sorry, I don't have anything left for the general market. But anyway, thank you very much for your time and for your support of this channel, and I'd love to hear what you think about these books, these items. If you have them, if you want to have them, if they're on your wish list, let me know in the comments. But otherwise, take care, and I will talk to you later.